Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show and happy Friday. We're going into Super Bowl weekend, everybody. I told you Doug and I are going to go. This is the first time we've ever been. We were invited by the CEO of YouTube and we said yes. I met him when I was in Washington for the inauguration. I didn't know him. And I think we'd met one other time, but obviously we're not on a first name basis exactly. And it was actually a very productive meeting. I told him the things that I would love to see YouTube change. And you guys know me, I was very frank and he was very respectful. And I did acknowledge to him what you guys know is true, which is with our show, they have been very fair. We've only gotten clipped a couple of times and I raised the specific issues and you guys know what those are too, because I'm not shy about it. I don't like the fact that you can't describe what's being done to so-called trans children as mutilation. And YouTube will potentially demonetize your show, will pull your show. So we talked about that. And I am hopeful about progress in the free speech lane now, because all of big tech, I think, is reevaluating life under Donald Trump, right? Anyway, we're going to go, and it'll be my very first Super Bowl. I'm very excited to do this. I'm grateful for the invitation, and I don't know what to expect. Like football, but it's supposed to be like a big, extravaganza the whole weekend. And I will have a full report for you guys of the behind-the-scenes happenings when we get back to the show on Monday. And we will have a show on Monday. I think Abby will correct me. I think it might be one of those that's going to have to drop later in the day. Yeah, 6 p.m. Steve Krakauer tells me, because we got to fly back that day. Anyway, we'll talk in a minute about what Trump is saying about the Super Bowl, because he's going to, and I'm actually hoping I'm going to be able to see him while he's there. And what the ads, because you always get the preview of the ads that they're going to drop, what they tell us about where America is in 2025. I mean, it's very telling and it's very interesting. Gosh, there's so many punctuations on storylines we've all been talking about together for the past couple of years. It's just such an inflection point right now in our society with Trump taking over in the 2 weeks. Everything's on fire in a great way. Unless you're a leftist, in which case you're still crying in your soup. I can't help you. Oh, well, anyway. And they're getting really upset about the spending cuts. We're going to have a first-time guest on the show today named Mike Solana. He's after VDH, who's up first. He's the editor-in-chief of a publication called Pirate Wars. And his target audience is like guys in their 20s and 30s who are in tech. And he makes a really interesting point. He dropped this great piece, and in his piece, he raises the point that, boy, they're really freaking out over the cuts to USAID. And they're really freaking out over possible cuts to the Department of Education. I'll tell you in a second what they're doing there today. I'm not really seeing the protests in the street about deporting the immigrants, about closing the border, about the trans executive orders, about the DEI executive orders. He's so right. Where did they draw the line in the sand? Do not fire the federal bureaucrats. The deep state must stay. Now it's war, right? All this bullshit that they say to pander to their far left base about the wokes, the trans people and the DEI. No, it's, wait a minute, you're cutting federal bureaucrat fat cat jobs? It's on. And that brings me to the Department of Education this morning, where the Democrats get a little insurrection-y this morning over there in their fight, not just with Trump, but with Elon Musk. They try to storm the building, but meanwhile it's we don't even have a Trump-appointed DOE chief. It's Linda McMahon, but she hasn't even had her confirmation hearing scheduled. So who exactly are you going to go tear down when you get in there? What's your plan exactly if you do get through the door? Maxine Waters, who of course was there. The leftists, they're very upset. Not about Trump. You don't even hear Trump's name that much, but about Elon. And there is a brand new cover of Time magazine, which will show you exactly that, not to mention the ridiculousness on CNN. Okay, so we're going to talk all about that and much, much more with VDH. Victor Davis Hanson is here. He's senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and author of The End of Everything, How Wars Descend into Annihilation. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and follow me on Insta, Facebook, and X. This show is dedicated to uncovering the truth in a media landscape often dominated by left-leaning narratives, especially when it comes to President Trump. It's safe to say you can expect more agenda-driven stories and factual distortions all over the rest of the news. But I do want to tell you about Ground News. Unlike other platforms that censor or amplify certain narratives, Ground News is not a news publisher. They're an independent app and website that aggregates every source on a story so you can compare coverage and see through mainstream media spin. Ground News has an entire blind spot feed with stories that are receiving lopsided coverage. It truly reveals how media narratives are shaping the conversation. My viewers are going to get 40% off their Vantage plan, which gives you unlimited access to their website and their app. They are independent. They are supported by subscribers, not corporate interests. You can check them out at groundnews.com/Megan. That's ground, GROUND, news.com/Megan to take back control of the news you consume. BDH, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Megan.
My next guest will forgive me for stealing his point for the top of the show, but I think it's a really good one, don't you? About this is where they really did get upset, and it's actually causing protests in the street. Not all the other stuff that they've been whining about for 4 years.
Yeah, I think so. But the problem they're having is that on almost every one of these issues, there's 70% approval rating on Trump. He's picked these issues primarily for that reason. The border and energy and cutting waste, there's overwhelming support for it all. So every time they say they're going to have a big protest, or Hakeem Jeffries says he's going to go in the street, he's not going to go in the street. Cory Booker's not going to go in the street. There's no support for it. If they've cut Social Security, yeah, or Medicare, yeah, but he's not going to do that. So this is a slow motion suicide of the Democratic Party. They're screaming and yelling on the confirmation. You've aired probably the voting at the DNC, that crazy, I don't know what you would call it, quotas on which candidate was of which sort of sexual orientation. It's just
they wanted non-binaries represented equally.
Yeah, and then this meltdown over Elon Musk. Elon Musk, I mean, the National Security Advisor of the United States doesn't have to be confirmed. He serves at the wish of the president. So Elon Musk doesn't have, he's the same category. And, during I was just thinking, during World War II, FDR really turned over his foreign policy to Bernard Baruch and Harry Hopkins. They had no Doge type affiliation. They were just, I don't know what you'd call them, senior counselors. They didn't even work for the government. And Harry Hopkins moved in for 4 years into the White House. And Republicans say this guy's running all the foreign policy during the war. And then if you think about the scientific stuff that Elon's trying to do and bring coding and everything in for efficiency, they just turned over the war effort on the War Production Board. These guys weren't elected. They were not confirmed. Henry Ford, Henry Kaiser, William Knudsen, they just rebooted the entire American economy. They were geniuses at what they did. But this is not new to have an advisor. What's new is that he actually has a statutory authority in this new agency of Doge. But I don't know whether he's an apostate and they're furious at him because Tesla and his wealth was used on their behalf, but they're just committing suicide, and they're down to 31%. That's the lowest in my lifetime they've ever been, approval rating. And I guess they want to go down to 20, and they will get there if they keep this hysteria up.
Here is how it looked outside of the Department of Education today, where they tried to get in, but the security would not let them.
Were you told to stand here, or did you decide to stand here and block members of Congress from entering the Department of Education?
To federal buildings?
We're allowed in there.
So do you understand who members of Congress are?
And you don't care.
Who are we then?
You don't care.
We have a job to do.
We're not dangerous people. We're not, I don't know, security. There are no thieves and thugs out here. We're members of Congress.
With identification.
We're teachers.
This is our job.
This is our job. We're doing our job. Trying to request a meeting, and they have a private security contractor who on his own is making decisions on behalf of the Department of Education.
Look them in the eye. Come on, hold your face up. Look at them. Let them see you. This is him.
look at it. What's your name? Tell us your name. Give me that ID again.
The ID I showed you.
So what?
I showed you the ID.
You do what?
I showed you the ID.
Could you let me see the ID again? Huh?
No.
No? Will someone else ask him for the ID?
I think I speak for everyone when I say we're on his side. I mean, can you imagine if the dynamic were reversed there, Victor? And if it were a white man saying to Maxine Water, get your head up. Look at me. Give me your ID. Show it to me again. Get it out. She can be as disrespectful as she wants of him, though.
Yeah, and this isn't the first time. During the first term, she told everybody to bird dog and harass and get in the faces and follow Trump supporters into restaurants and stuff. And then we had Al Green, and I think this is the 5th time he's been screaming about impeaching Donald Trump. And Hakeem Jeffries, who says he's a moderate, but he's not, he was telling everybody to go out in the streets. Cory Booker is replaying the Spartacus role of the confirmation hearing of Kavanaugh. He's screaming and yelling about, as if he's Winston Churchill, we're going to fight on the beaches and all this. It's insane. And they don't understand that most people, I'd say the vast majority of people are so sick of it. And they just want to cut the size of government. They don't want to give the BBC 8% of its budget. They really don't want to do that. They don't want to pay for the subscriptions of bureaucrats to Politico. That's beside all the trans and gay stuff. And another thing they don't mention is we're spending a lot of money to go into traditional fundamentalist societies in the Middle East and Asia, and then almost as if we're 19th century pith hat British imperialists and starting to, pride flag. And you'd think that after Kabul, when the pride flag was on the embassy and George Floyd murals and the gender studies, they would have learned their lesson. That if you really want to alienate a traditional society, you don't bring in trans and gay and all of these crazy, politically correct sesame on the street on Middle East TV. But they're really cultural imperials. That's what's so ironic about it. And they turn off people overseas. So when Elon says get rid of it, it would be better for foreign relations. I think he's right. It's not just the 50 billion we'd save, but we wouldn't appear so obnoxious and sermonizing and arrogant to all of these societies that purportedly we're helping.
The pushback, I don't know what she thought she was going to accomplish, just because she's a member of Congress, that she can just show up unannounced, barge into the DOE with a bunch of civilians they don't know, they haven't cleared. Their intent once they get into the DOE is unclear. Can you imagine what the kind of hot water he would have been into if they had just let them all in? Just come on in. Now I guess this is the new standard on Capitol Hill in the wake of January 6th. If you're a Democrat, it's fine. You can storm the building, you can blow past security, you can harass the officers. That's all good. I was told that was really bad and insurrection-y, but I guess Maxine Waters can get away with it. So that's one thing, because they're going to cut federal jobs, and that's what she's really upset about. But there is, meanwhile, some civil disobedience, I don't know what you want to call it, in response to some of Trump's reforms, and it's starting to crop up already. Yesterday, we talked about how in New York State, the Attorney General ordered hospitals not to comply with Trump's executive order banning these trans procedures on minors. He said you cannot give the puberty blockers and the cross-sex hormones, and you cannot do the surgeries. And she said if you don't do all those things, NYU Langone, which stopped doing it in the wake of Trump's order, I'll sue you for a violation of our anti-discrimination, and pro-equal protection laws. So far, they appear to be holding the line, complying with the president. Now, today, you get, yesterday you had Trump's executive order on banning boys from girls' sports. And California has come out today to say, we won't comply. We're not following that. We don't believe in it. We want the boys in the sports, and we're going to keep doing it. And then on top of all that, you have Tom Homan trying to go city to city, get out the worst of the worst immigrants, illegal immigrants, for which there's overwhelming support by both parties to deport the criminal illegals, the ones who have committed additional crimes in addition to being here illegally. And he's trying to get out Venezuelan gang members out of this Colorado town, and somebody leaked that he was about to be there with his deportation force, and they went apartment to apartment in this building, and they were empty. And Tom Homan says heads will roll. But clearly there is subterfuge afoot here, Victor, amongst many, both in official positions and not, to try to stop the people's mandate.
Yeah, the problem with this is, say here in California, we're no different. If you look at polls on, trans women and female sports, it's about 70% against it. If you look at trans surgeries for minors, it's about 80% against it. If you look at deportation of criminals, it's about 70% for it. So on almost every one of these issues, they're on the wrong side. And then what they're really frustrated about, Megan, is they don't have the White House, they don't have the House, they do not have the Senate, they do not have the Supreme Court, they do not have public support on any of these issues. They have no power of subpoena, they can no power to block confirmation. They're completely impotent. And that was their own doing, and they're very frustrated because they have given a sample paradigm blueprint through Joe Biden's executive orders and his pressing the limits of what a president can do, and it came right into Trump's hands. And he said, Biden did all of this stuff, then I guess he set a precedent. And they've really shot themselves in the foot, and this is not going to go well because we have federal laws, and this is Confederate nullification. We have 600 sanctuary jurisdictions, and technically they're all breaking federal law. And the Constitution is very clear. A state law does not surpass a federal law, and they can't defy it. We settled that in the Civil War. And believe me, Megan, if a county in Wyoming or Utah said, you know what, we are a sanctuary gun city, and we're not going to require any federal handgun registration, and the Endangered Species Act does not apply here, they would go crazy. They would say, that's neo-Confederate. You're defying federal law. So because he has this power, and they have none, Trump can just say, pick which federal program you don't want, but you're breaking federal law, so I have no intention of extending federal money to you until you comply. And I think the courts will probably back him up on that.
Well, the other question is, in California, exactly what college program are they funneling these trans students into? Because the NCAA came out after Trump's executive order saying, we will comply 100%. Boys are no longer welcome to play in girls' sports under the moniker trans. Sorry, but we're complying. And they seem to me relieved to finally have had somebody at the federal level give very clear guidance. Before it was, okay, let each individual sport decide whether it's fair or not. And you could see that these athletic organizations like the NCAA were tying themselves in knots, trying not to be the one to say, we want a blanket ban. I mean, within 2 seconds, this guy said, yeah, we'll do what Trump said. So think of it. You're out in California, you're on a girls' volleyball team, half the team is boys posing as girls, and the college recruiters come. Well, guess what? Not a single one of those boys is going to be able to play college volleyball for girls. Not a single one. So what does that mean? Are they more likely to go visit your team? I would venture to say no. They're actually probably not that interested in you because they know you're mostly boys, not girls, and they're out recruiting for girls. And what happens to those trans kids, those so-called trans kids? Nothing. They won't be playing college athletics if they don't do something to just activate a lane for trans people. That's what they should be working on. A meaningful lane for trans people to play sports in their own lane, or they can play as what they are, biological boys. But instead, we have this defiance, which makes them feel good, Victor, but sets no one up for success.
Yeah, I mean, here in California, we've got about $100 billion bill minimum to get Los Angeles ready for the Olympics, and they're going to need a massive infusion of federal money. And you can see Gavin Newsom, he bent the knee almost immediately when he saw Trump. They understand that. Trump doesn't have to make a big deal of it. He just has to say, if I'm going to give you this federal money, I'm going to send Rick Grenell out, and he's going to watch over it. And he's got public support. There's such a backlash right now about the DEI and what happened in Los Angeles. I don't want to prejudge what happened at Reagan Airport, but there's enough information to suggest that there was non-meritocratic hiring in the FAA, and they're on the wrong side of every one of these issues, and now people are starting to get really angry about it. And I think what's also missed here is when Donald Trump came into office, they were very confident because they thought that they could infiltrate the administrative state. As remember, Anonymous said he was going to stop Trump from the inside. We had Vindman doing it. We had Rex Tillerson calling Trump stupid. We had Jim Mattis. We had all of these guys, and Trump got wise, and he said, you know what, I'm not going to have any of them. I'm going to have people that are more MAGA than I am, and I'm going to turn loose. And they can't handle that. They're looking for some interior person. Maybe the Secretary of State, maybe the Secretary of Defense can sabotage it like we used to do. But there's no one there. And so they don't have any power now. And I've never seen such asymmetry, and they're just getting angrier because they're used to being coddled, and they're losing the media now. They don't know what to do with your podcast, Joe Rogan's. They have no idea how to compete with that. They're losing lawsuits for the first time, big lawsuits. And it's like that whole revolution is now meeting a counter-revolution, cultural, social, economic, political. Kind of like the reaction against the Jacobins and Robespierre and the French Revolution. All of a sudden people said, you know what, I'm not going to change the date of the French Republic. I'm not going to tear down statues. I'm not going to behead anybody anymore. And the people who did it are going to account for this. And the whole country rose up within a matter of weeks. And this is what, it's kind of like this was all a mystique, a bad dream we've been in, a coma. And now we're waking up and people said, I can't believe we did that. I can't believe we had these crazy pronouns on email. I can't believe we had this trans 0.001 of the population. We claim 20% of kids want to transition. This was a collective madness, and now we're waking up. And I think the only thing I don't know how far rightward the counter-revolution is going to go, but it hasn't really fully expressed itself yet.
I agree. Oh, I love what you said. Yeah, it's like the fever broke. That's how it feels, you know?
Yes,
like we were all in this horrible, sick period, and now the fever broke, and we're out, and we can live normally. But there's hangers on who enjoyed the fever, you know, the ones who love misery. They're miserable, and they want you to be too. And most of them are at MSNBC and CNN. And so you can see them holding on to the last vestiges of wokeism, like, no, I won't let it go. It made me feel superior and better than you. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that just to prove my point. I'll start on CNN, where a trans athlete activist named Chris Mosier had the following to say in SOT 13.
There's no evidence that trans athletes have an advantage over anyone else in sports. Trans athletes play sports for the same reasons as anybody else, for our love of the game, to be a part of a team, to challenge ourselves, and most of all, for the youth level, to have fun. And every young person deserves that opportunity to be their authentic self and to play the sports that they love without compromising any part of who they are.
Okay, so there's no evidence that trans athletes
that's a
have an
pathological
advantage.
Yeah, that's a pathological lie. He knows well that a trans woman that was a biological male has not only hurt people but wins records they otherwise would not in a male. And he knows that women who transition into men have no record of consistent success against biological males. They don't win anything. So when we talk about trans sports abuses, we're always talking about biological males that say they're women and they're competing against women. We're never talking about women who say now they're males and I can beat regular, males. It doesn't happen. If it does happen, it's almost so rare that nobody even knows about it. So when he says there's no difference, he knows. If there was no difference, we would have this argument right now. Oh my God, we've got all of these transitioning males that have female bodies, and they're just sweeping all of these swimming and track contests.
Look
Never
at this.
happened.
Look at Leah Thomas, towering over his competitor. Is that Riley? I can't even tell. That is Riley Gaines, with whom he tied for 5th place in that infamous race in which they let him hold the trophy, not her. But look at this guy. I mean, look at this, Victor. This is from the NCAA championships a couple of years ago. He's towering over them. He was in the 500s in his ranking as a male the previous season. He crossed over to female, and they let him play without doing anything. And he dominated. He won. He was in 1st place in many of these races, just not for nothing. But female athletes have lost nearly 900 medals to transgender rivals competing against them in women's sport. According to the United Nations, the study called Violence Against Women and Girls in Sports stated that more than 600 female athletes have been bested at various events by competitors born male. 600 in more than 400 competitions, have lost more than 890 medals in 29 different sports. And yet CNN wants to let this person get on there and say there's no evidence that trans athletes have an advantage over any. I mean, our eyes belie the claim. So why would CNN do that, Victor? Why are they doing that, right? They can't let go.
Well, they can't let go, and they know if they're like addicts. They know that the fix that they're getting is destroying them, is killing them. And they know every time they put that person like that on, they lose market share, they lose money. They've settled these defamation suits, but they have people still working for them that think, I'm going to put these people on, makes me feel good, I get high on it, and I know it's going to end nowhere but to bankruptcy and destroying, but I can't stop. And that's what MSNBC and CNN, Los Angeles Times, they're all the same, and they can't stop. And
so there's another example I want to show you. Okay, while we're on the subject of CNN, I could be doing this all day on MSNBC too, but CNN at least is trying to claim that they're more fair and balanced, which is not true. They're really not letting go of the race thing. So they've got this show on hosted by Abby Phillip, who is as woke as they come on every issue. She thinks she's downtrodden, poor her, because she's a black woman, and therefore we're supposed to be feeling sorry for her. She made that very clear in a segment the other night, but she makes it clear in pretty much all of her segments. So this is a segment in which she had on 2 black women as guests. She is a black woman, and 2 white men as well, along with 1 white woman. And the 2 white men are names that our audience probably knows. Scott Jennings, who's the only fair guy over there on CNN and a Republican, and our pal Arthur Aidala, who's a lawyer. I mean, he doesn't often do political commentary, but he's doing some over on CNN. He got completely ambushed as these, I mean, honestly, all these women are extremely successful. You would have thought that it was 1949 America, the way this thing went down. Watch this.
We live in different realities.
That's right.
I live in a reality where I know I do not have the same opportunity as you. I know I don't.
And you know
and
that
I know
too.
Let's go.
I got it. And you know that.
Let me just tell you about me. I got a law degree, a master's, and 2 bachelors. Probably more education than all y'all added up together on this table, right? And I have always been the least paid person on payroll at every institution I have worked in. And it's not
Even
because
in the White House? Well, whose fault is that? I don't think you worked for George W. or Trump.
Well, guess what happened
Obama's.
But I think you made it, and you are the most respected voice often at every room or every table you're in, not because of anything other than your talent and your work ethic.
I have faced this. I just said I was the least paid person, even in this moment sometimes, to my counterparts. I do believe I'm qualified. I know I'm qualified. You won't ever tell me I'm not qualified. But the system that I live in doesn't matter about my qualifications.
Jaded. I am the Attorney General is a black woman. The mayor's a black man. The head of the Senate is a black man.
Okay, New York is a small representation.
Well, small. New York is not that small.
But the numbers also show black women are one of the most educated demographics in this country and one of the least paid. Why would that make any sense?
Why would that make any sense?
2, 3.
It's incredibly frustrating to watch that kind of thing, Victor. I mean, I guarantee Abby Phillip was out there just as bad as the other 2. I guarantee you she's making over $1 million. And yet she's still, like Michelle Obama, wants us to think this is a racist, sexist country that won't reward her adequately for her talents. And then you got this other girl over there. Her name is Carrie Champion. No, sorry. It was Ashley Allison, Abby Phillip, and Carrie Champion. All 3 of them were giving them the business. And she's going, I don't have the same opportunity. I've been the least paid in all my jobs. How do you know that's due to your color and your gender, right? Maybe you were the youngest. Maybe you had the least experience. Maybe you didn't, and you actually just weren't that talented. I've seen you on TV. You're fine. You're not a star. You're never going to get your own show. There's a reason they haven't offered it to you yet. And it's not because you're a black woman, because you're on the show of a black woman. Clearly, CNN doesn't have a problem with that. Maybe you're just not that talented. Maybe you're not quite as good on television or in the White House for Obama, who I don't think has a bias against black women, as you think you are. But this is their chance to get out there, even though the nation has just issued a referendum on the nonsense around this kind of thinking, to say, you're all wrong. We're victims.
Like the moon.
Yeah, well, on all these things, again, I go back to reality, not what they say, but what they do. I've been in academia 50 years. I probably chaired 20, maybe 40 search committees. In not one case did I ever have a problem with getting a qualified black, Hispanic, and mostly female into graduate school, law school, or medical schools undergrad. If I had a white male, I figured that he had to have 40 to 100 points at least higher in the SAT, perfect, and I still couldn't get them in. And I must have had 100 calls in my life when I would complain from these Ivy League schools that say, we do not want any more white males. That's just a fact. And when you apply for college, Megan, there is no instance of any African American or Hispanic who is applying for college who says, no, I'm going to lie and say I'm white so I can get advantage. There is a whole pathology of people who are white claiming, like Elizabeth Warren, that they're 1/16th, 1/10th Native American, Hispanic. Right. That was my biggest problem. I get calls and the people say, Victor, this person says he's 1/8 black, he's 1/15th Cherokee. Can you verify that? And so why would people do that if what she said is true? And the fact is, for the last 40 years, being a person of color is an advantage. And what's getting people very angry is that when Barack Obama came in, he got rid of the old binary, affirmative action, black, 12%, white, 88%, special consideration because of slavery, Jim Crow, income disparity. He said, no. It's now going to be diversity, and we're going to define that as anybody who's not white. And all of a sudden, people from India, from China, and it was like, all of a sudden you see somebody coming from the Punjab who makes $150,000. He's a minority, or she's this, and then the white working class finally rebelled against it. They said, you know what, this has nothing to do with oppression. There's no history of racism or culpability in many of these groups. They have a higher per capita income than whites do. 16 different ethnic groups do, and yet they're getting this diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's what broke the back of it. It was completely absurd. People were willing to say, because of the historic racism toward blacks, they were willing to support affirmative action for a while. But after 50 years, they said, at some point, when do we stop violating the Constitution by having racial preferences? But they never supported diversity, equity, inclusion, because it was a complete fraud. And the other thing about it is, the old Rainbow Coalition of Jesse Jackson, intersectionality, we're going to make this great non-white complex of Hispanics, Native Americans, blacks, trans. There was no evidence ever that any of these groups had more affinity with each other than they did for whites. Many of them just identified as people. And she should ask herself why 48% of the Hispanic vote went for Trump, and here, and Hispanic males were 54%. So-called people of color, intersectionality. What happened? They voted against a black woman, and they are people of color. She should ask why that is. And the answer was, they said, we're no longer going to identify as essentially a particular race that's going to be incidental. We're more worried about human concerns like inflation or energy prices or crime. And that's what frightens them, because they can't get off that fixation. And she knows the more she talks like she did on the air, the more she turns off, not white males alone, but Hispanic, everybody. And she can't stop. She's so used to being given deference, she cannot stop. Same thing with The View. If you just change it around, like you said, you flipped it over and a white person was talking about blacks and collective stereotypes, you would have I don't know, they'd be off the air in a nanosecond.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look what happened. So this Jasmine Crockett, she's a representative out of the state of Texas. She went on TV the other night. This is CNN too. And she was responding to the fact that the Trump administration hired in some lower level capacity a guy who had sent out some racially charged tweets about how if you really want things done, you should hire white men. They were not good tweets. So, okay, fine, she can criticize this guy, but listen to the language in which she does it. And you ask me whether anybody could get away with doing this. Exchange the races, a white person talking this way about black commentators. Here it is.
No, it doesn't change my opinion because we saw what he literally recently just posted, and the coddling is for the white boys. That's what's happening right now. I am tired of the white tears. Listen, if you are competent, you are not concerned. When I walk into Congress every single day, you know why I don't feel away and why you can't make me doubt who I am? Is because I know that I had to work 10 times as hard as they did just to get into the seat. When you look and you compare me to Marjorie Taylor Greene or me to Lauren Boebert, there is no comparison. And that is the life that we have always lived. So the only people that are crying are the mediocre white boys that have been beaten out by people that historically have had to work so much harder. They don't want any more Kamala Harris's. They don't want any more Jasmine Crockett's. But I got news for them. I don't care what they do. We will fight to the end to make sure that we get our due. Because again, if you want to talk about the people that shouldn't be in this country, you probably need to look in the mirror. Because the last time I checked, the Native Americans who some of ICE have been rounding up, or the Puerto Ricans who are absolutely Americans. Listen, the only people that came and colonized this place are your ancestors, Trump.
Okay, just to reiterate. So picture this. Picture a white person sitting there saying, coddling is for the black boys. I'm sick and tired of the black tears. I had to work 10 times harder than any of the black people. I'm sick of these mediocre black boys. It's obviously offensive. It's racist. It's incredibly racially charged. She's so deeply offensive. Total pass. You can talk like that, no problem on CNN, because you're ripping on whites and white men in particular, and because they teed it up with one guy's racist tweet, so you can just go off and be as equally or more racist as you want.
Why? But the thing she doesn't understand is, if you look at Asians, they went from about 30% for Trump in 2020 to almost 45%. Hispanics, as I said, they were 48%. They went up 15 points. Hispanic males went up 20 points. According to her idea of intersectionality, why would a person that she would consider, and she mentioned Native American, but Native American vote went for Trump. That was really shocking. But why would all of these groups that are so-called non-white vote for a white male other than
well, you know what they say.
A black
you know
woman?
What they say, Victor?
I know.
They say that the Hispanics are white adjacent, or those are black people who want to be white adjacent and sort of be near the circles of power.
I live here in the San Joaquin Valley, and this is not the first diaspora from northern Mexico, where people came in the 1950s and 60s they were indistinguishable from Italians, say. These are people coming up that are indigenous, and they're from Oaxaca, Chiapas, Michoacan, and they are distinctly identifiable as indigenous people. And that is the new influx of the last 30 years. That is the demographic, not the so-called northern Mexicans of 50 years ago who were more or less the bulwark of the Democratic Party. The people who are voting Republican are first-generation Mexican-American males from the deepest part of Mexico, the most impoverished. Some people, Spanish is their second language. They speak an indigenous Mixotec. Why would they vote for Donald Trump over a black woman? Nobody forced them to do that. It's not Marxist false consciousness or what's wrong with Kansas and all that crap that intellectuals try to say. They do it because they're sick and tired of someone talking nonstop like Representative Crockett about race. And they think that people who deliver the goods, cheaper gas, cheaper energy, more jobs, safer streets, they want to live in a world like that. That's why they left Mexico, not to recreate Mexico. And so she has no support. And I think the longer that she talks like that, and the longer the people in The View do, and the longer Senator Warren or Hirono scream and yell, or Cory Booker keeps yelling and screaming, it's going to drive down the Democratic Party into nothing.
Yeah.
They should go back, Megan, and look at the 92 and 96 Democratic Convention statements. They were written by Doug Schoen and Mark Penn. I could not believe them. I went back and looked at them, and after being in the wilderness for 12 years with Reagan and Bush 1, even with Ross Perot, they won the election. And you look at it, it says, we, the Democratic Party, are for tough crime, no exemptions given to youth. We want to balance the budget. We want to close the border, legal-only immigration. That's what they talked about, and they won. And they've never, and Obama mouthed that for 4 years, and then he went full Jacobin, just like these people, and they're not going to win. And she's the militant black, or any militant that puts race as the essential characteristic of somebody in a multiracial society, a postmodern race. They're not going to win. People are sick of it. Look at the military. They're having record. They are getting almost 10,000 recruits in December and January. They're going to meet their goal for the first time. The Pentagon's not going to have to lie. For the last 3 years, they're short 40, 50, and they say, well, kind of, sort of, we really didn't have that goal, so they lower the goal. We met it. But now there's people rejoining because they think it's going to be less race-obsessed and less DEI and more meritocratic. It's kind of a renaissance, and she's on the losing end. And I expect them to get that group cadre to get smaller and smaller and louder and meaner and more racist. And I think because they're losing, and they're going to be completely impotent if they continue.
The numbers with the military are amazing. Pete Hegseth tweeted this out the other day. In December, the U.S. Army had its best recruiting number in 12 years. Obviously, this is post-Trump's election. In January 2025, the Army hit its best recruiting number in 15 years. Bottom line, America's youth want to serve under the bold and strong America First leadership of real Donald Trump. And Pete Hegseth, too, who's getting all the wokeness out of the military. I just wanted to make a couple points on this. So, in that debate, the annoying debate with the three women against Arthur and Scott Jennings, one of them, she's asking for where are all the black women? And Arthur, who's a lawyer, says, look at the Supreme Court. And on the Supreme Court, we have a black woman, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and we have a black man, Clarence Thomas. And we have 4 women, by the way. We have 4 women on there, 3 libs and Amy Coney Barrett. And so he says, look at the Supreme Court. And they say, but how many? And he says, there's 2 black people on the Supreme Court, 2 out of 9, which is greater than the population level. And they say, but how many? And he says, well, there's a one black woman and there's a black man too. And he said, well, look at the population percentage, right? Black women are 6% of the population. But I don't know. What's 1 out of 9? It's more than 10%. And so he says, look at the and they say, oh, then don't go to numbers. Just stop doing numbers. Meanwhile, they brought up numbers. They say, how many are on there? He's like, well, look, what's the population number? They said, well, don't bring up numbers. So they don't want to go there, right? It's like, wait, you're so oppressed. Black women can't get anywhere in America, just because they're black and they're women. Did anybody mention Kamala Harris? The Democrats just had a black female presidential nominee. They had a black president, but they had a black female vice president in the last term. None of that counts. You see, the numbers are never good enough, even when they're greater than the population share. There's always something you can say if it's not parity, if it's not 50-50. Even though that's not what the population is, there's something wrong with America.
There is. Does anybody want to say, let's get rid of merit, and we're going to have 15% of the Super Bowl teams are going to be Asian, and we're going to insist on 20% are Hispanic, and they have to have 68% white. And the NFL
Maybe women.
And the NBA, and women. NFL and the NBA range from 65 to 70% African American. Same thing with the Federal Postal Service is about 28% black. And so whenever you get to those numbers, and here, where I work at Stanford University, for the last 4 years, they let in 9% white males. White males constitute about 33% of the population. And they waived the SAT. And all of a sudden now, Megan, they say, oh, wait a minute. We're going to go back and have an SAT from now on. Oh, wait a minute. We're going to start comparatively ranking your GPA on the quality of your high school again. Oh, wait a minute. There's no more Hamas camps out screaming and yelling. Oh, wait, they're not breaking into the president. And you know why? because Donald Trump, like some fearful colossus, is telling them, and they get the message, we may tax your endowment. You may have to pay on your endowment another $1.5 billion. Oh, by the way, if these people commit a felony on your campus, whether you suspend them or not, we might yank their green card. And it's had a catastrophic effect on the left. It's so weird. It's almost as if they said, well, just forget all the stuff I said, just forget about all the windows, just Judge Duncan, I ran out of the law school and humiliated him. I'm not going to do that anymore because I am a careerist and I don't want a felony on my record. And the one thing I do not want to do is go back to Gaza, Syria, Iran, Iraq, whatever. And the same thing with the people that shut down the 101. All these people were waving the flag of the country under no circumstances for those undocumented they ever wanted to go back to. And they were burning in the middle of 101 the flag of the country they're insisting on staying. That is so incoherent. It makes no sense. Blocking commuters of the middle class trying to get to work. That type of performance art doesn't work. It just turns people off. I work with all liberal people at Stanford University. I cannot tell you that people will come up and they'll whisper to you. And they'll say, what do you think about this DEI thing? I said, what do you think? I think it's time to go. I think it's time to go. I think we need the SAT again. I think we don't need the DEI czars looking at the percentage of race and grades on my grade cards and going over my syllabus and telling me I can't teach. So everybody is sick of it, even the people on the left. And it's like Donald Trump. I don't know what it is. It's kind of like that scene in The Wizard of Oz when they pull back that curtain, Toto does, and you see this little man with these gears, and everybody thought he had this big scary face. The Wizard of Oz was so scary, and he was just this little nothing. And I think that's what happened with the DEI and the woke and the Green New Deal. We were all bullied, and they say, you can't say this, don't do that, they'll deplatform you, they'll shadow ban you, they'll cancel culture you. And then all of a sudden enough people said, go ahead, I don't care. And then it just shattered. It was all smoke and mirrors. And now, because it wasn't based on reality. And now on the internet,
and it's based on something so anti-American, like so unfair in the case of the sports. One other point on that, Megan Rapinoe, famous women's soccer star. Again, she's just like Abby Phillip and those panelists. She's just like Jasmine Crockett. Only in her case, it's even worse because what she's looking to do is pull up the ladder after her. Like she got through women's soccer, having to only compete against women. And she became a star and a multimillionaire off of Americans and their love to watch her play. And now she wants my little girl to compete against boys. My girl is a soccer player. My girl is very talented. And she wants my girl to play against fully intact biological males who have gone through male puberty. Here she is with is this her wife, Sue Bird, the basketball player talking on their podcast about this push to protect girls in sport just the other day.
I think the main question out of this that I have is like, how prevalent is the issue of trans athletes? This whole thing has really just been this effort to, for politicians mostly, but for people to scare people, for people to tap into the unknown. And they're using this guise of protecting women and girls in sports. And really just, it's like fear mongering. It's just like, all of the instances that we hear about, it's like 1 or 2 kids or 1 kid, or, there's less than 10 athletes, as Charlie Baker was saying, out of 510,000. They're taking over women's sports and we have to protect women from women's sports. I mean, I've always just thought that was very laughable to hear.
It's amazing.
Now she says it's over. It's exaggerated, and when all the scientific studies showed it was 0.001, and then all the campuses were saying they were lying. It's actually 20% of all youth want to transition. They can't figure out whatever argument is convenient for the moment, but they know what they're doing. And they have no.
What she knows for sure is that any girl who has to compete against a biological boy is in danger. She just doesn't care. It's more important to her to seem like a good person than it is to her what happens to my kid or somebody else's kid listening to this show. And all of us have risen up and elected Donald Trump, who has told her she can pound sand. We care more about these girls' safety than we do about Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird, her fiance, feeling good about themselves as virtuous people. Those days are past. We know they're not. All right, VDH stays with us. Don't go away. 4 years of crushing interest rates, runaway inflation, and reckless government spending. And who is paying the price? You. You might have bills stacking up, debt collectors on your back. You might barely be able to keep food on the table. Well, Done With Debt can be a way out. They have developed new aggressive strategies designed to get you out of debt permanently without bankruptcy or loans. Done With Debt stands between you and your bill collectors. They can go head-to-head with creditors, getting balances reduced, interest rates slashed, and penalties stopped. These guys will create a plan to end your debt fast and put more cash in your pocket every month. And right now, Done With Debt is accepting new clients. But you have to act fast. Some credit relief programs expire. Before you make another payment, consider a visit to donewithdebt.com or call 1-888-322-1054 right now. Speak with one of their debt relief strategists for free. Go to donewithdebt.com. That's donewithdebt.com. So, Victor, this week we finally saw the transcript from CBS News of that infamous Kamala Harris sit down right before the election. They were forced to turn it over to the FCC after a complaint was filed by Team Trump about possible deception in advertising and in dealing with the public. And what we saw was that terrible answer that she gave to Netanyahu's not listening, which had one answer on 60 Minutes and a different answer in the teaser clip that aired on Face the Nation. Got no better behind the scenes. It was really just those two answers melded together. That's all that was there. But what was more interesting was some of the stuff they omitted, they cut from the interview. And nobody's obligated to air the whole interview. It doesn't always happen that you air the whole. 60 never airs the whole interview. But it was very interesting what they chose to cut out, including inanity like this.
Ambition and aspiration and dreams and optimism and hope. If you look at the character of who we are and how we have achieved the strength that we have achieved, I believe in large part of it because of our character and our belief in the promise of America. And I'm running for president because I want to do everything that is possible to create an opportunity for people to achieve those goals, those ambitions, and those dreams.
Oh my God. Now there is reporting today that CBS staffers are reportedly becoming increasingly upset about the drama unfolding over at 60 Minutes. That Puck News reporting about the mixed emotions from staffers following comments made by 60 Minutes executive producer Bill Owens, who told his colleagues at Monday's meeting that the editing was, quote, perfectly fine. Is the edit fine? One CBS News insider asked rhetorically. It's obviously an unforced error, and now they are upset at the possibility of CBS News settling the $10 billion lawsuit that Trump filed against them down in Texas, alleging fraud in their editing. And this is something that we expect they are going to settle because their parent company, Paramount, is trying to get a merger approved by the Trump administration. And CBS News, as you know, the vaunted journalists there don't want to pay him one dime. And even internally, though, are questioning whether they did the right thing in that ridiculous interview they aired.
Yeah, I think Corinne Jean-Pierre would call that a cheap fake when the edited version, because they don't even make it an argument anymore. They used to say that she was Socrates or Cicero or something, but you know, James Carville the other day said we lost because we had the seventh string as our candidate, and then when she gave a talk, I don't know if you saw that clip about the LA fires, it was even worse. So I guess when she talks like this, even her own supporters will say, they cringe and they'll say, we've got to edit this, or we've got to keep her off this stage. And the question is, how did she ever get where she was? Getting back to Representative Crocker's, you know, I mean, she had everything entitled from her from the very beginning. And from the very beginning, she had one card. And you saw that in the debate in 2020 with Joe Biden when she called him a racist. I was a little girl and you were the racist that stopped me from, going. I had to take a butt. All that stuff. And I won't even get into Willie Brown, but she was a mediocrity. I don't mean that in a mean way. She just was. And she was way over her head. She knew she was over her head. They knew she was over their head. And now the other day, Nancy Pelosi basically said, we decapitated our candidate, and Joe Biden in his enfeebleness was a better candidate than Kamala Harris. And so they know what they did. And that was the worst campaign, I think, in my lifetime. It really was. It was the most, and they had everything going. They had the money, they had the media on their side,
100%.
they had the administrative state on their side, and they still lost. And
But
she
there's
was
still, Victor,
completely
did you
inept.
see Jonathan Capehart of MSNBC sitting there
Yes,
with
I
all of
did.
the people running for DNC chair? And he's like, raise your hand if you think she lost because of racism and sexism. Every single person raised their hand, and he said, that's the correct answer. She lost because of racism and sexism, even though she had the likes of 60 Minutes running cover for her. And let me just show you something, and I'll give you the floor back, to your point about how she's not beloved. She doesn't inspire anyone. This was an AstroTurf campaign. Here, she and Doug Emhoff, her husband, swung by the LA Lakers game. That's where she lives, California, where she's from. They swung by the game this week, and look at the welcome. Literally, no one is even noticing them. Whatever cheers you hear for what's happening around them. There are no cheers. No one cares.
No one cares. And when they all said on that stage that it was racism and misogyny that got Trump elected because he was running against a black woman, why was she polling better than Joe Biden, who was the white male? Do they really believe that if they had, like Nancy Pelosi does, if they had put a white male against Donald Trump, he would have won? He wouldn't have won either. The problem wasn't the sex or the gender, it was the message. And the message repelled people, didn't just not energize them. They were sick of it. They were sick of the open border. They were sick of the 500,000 criminal illegal aliens. They were sick of the trans thing. They were sick of DEI, and they could have had second coming, they could have had a deity run and they wouldn't have won with that message. And they keep thinking, it's the messenger, or it's this, or it's that. No, it's you. It's what you stand for, and you hijacked the Democratic Party and ruined it. And you gave us a neo-socialist revolutionary party, and no one wants it. Nobody wants anything to do with it. And they can't accept that.
And people who are not afflicted with Trump derangement syndrome see all of this clearly. It's like, it really is like a disease. It's like syphilis, where it just infects your brain. You can't think straight anymore. And you can tell when somebody has. It's obvious. And that leads me to my next subject, which is the treatment of Melania Trump versus Bianca Censori. Okay, just bear with me. I'm going to tie it together. So Melania Trump puts out her new First Lady portrait, and she looks like $1 million. She's wearing a tuxedo jacket, and she's got her hands on a shiny desk. It's a power shot, and it's in black and white, and she looks absolutely stunning, as she always does. But I love it. She just looks like a boss, frankly. Okay, so here's Vogue reacting to it. Melania Trump looked more like she was guest starring on an episode of The Apprentice than assuming the role of First Lady. Trump's clothing certainly didn't help the boardroom pastiche. The choice to wear a tuxedo as opposed to a blazer or blouse made Trump look more like a freelance magician than a public servant. It's perhaps unsurprising that a woman who lived in a gold-encrusted penthouse whose fame is so intertwined with a reality television empire would refuse to abandon theatrics, even when faced with 248 years of tradition. And then they talk about how she sort of tried the first time around in 2017 with her first portrait, which was in color, with her face airbrushed into oblivion, something they would never say about Jill Biden. And now they conclude with, now attempting a no-nonsense businesswoman approach in her situationally inappropriate tuxedo, it seems that Melania Trump still struggles with sartorial messaging. Now, the woman who wrote this, I mean, she must be a style icon, right? It's got to be somebody who's like been on the cover of Vogue herself, who's in charge of their product line. No, it's a 26-year-old named Hannah Jackson, who's a fashion writer for Vogue, who lives in Brooklyn, New York, who writes, here she is. Look at this. This is the woman who thinks she's in the position to judge Melania. She says when she was offered her job as a fashion writer at Vogue a year and a half ago, she was a part-time dance teacher who had just emptied her savings to move across the country. This woman's done nothing. Do you hate Melania? You're hired. You're the one for us. Okay, I'm almost done. Now contrast that, it's not the same writer, but the same magazine, to what they wrote about Bianca Censori, the literally naked wife of Kanye West, Ye West, at the Grammys. She literally wore nothing. And they were there for it. This writer's named Raven Smith, and she writes all about how somehow this was empowering. She describes it as a slip so sheer, so without undergarments, that it exposed her uncensored nudity beneath. So, a slip, okay. She writes about how, look, fashion for me has always celebrated a body's sensuality rather than the unimaginative base-level provocation of a woman's nakedness. But she goes on to say, while I'm not necessarily advocating for snatch on the red carpet, it could also be argued that it's Bianca's body and therefore Bianca's choice. I hate to state the obvious, but a woman can wear whatever she wants. A woman can wear as many sheer bodysuits and thongs as she likes. A woman can court the male gaze. A woman can make a zillion choices we wouldn't personally make ourselves and still not have that mean she's being coerced or a victim, or that something predatory has happened. And then she writes that because Bianca's not speaking up, because we're bereft of any deeper motivations, the silence has us scrabbling for answers of our own. But maybe that's exactly what Bianca wanted. You see, that was empowering, but Melania Trump is a pathetic magician who is performing theatrics and is situationally inappropriate. But Bianca is totally appropriate and a badass girl boss.
You know, that I think everybody understands that Melania is the most photogenic, fashion conscious, but also in a very positive way since Jackie Kennedy. We've never seen even, the last time we had, whether fair or not, the last time we had anybody that glamorous, attractive, knowing about fashion, good taste was Jackie Kennedy. And they went crazy over Jackie Kennedy. I can remember as I was a kid. Every magazine had Jackie Kennedy. Jackie did this, Jackie wore this. And she actually dressed a lot like Melania. And then when they talk about the body, it was just 5 years ago, Megan, we heard about objectifying women during the Me Too thing, that you don't objectify a woman by just gazing at her body, or you don't do that, you male predators. And so the problem with all of this is that writer can't decide whether feminism is a Victorian prudery, that you look at a woman or you touch her shoulder and that is a mortal sin and you're going to destroy your career, or you can get naked and you can be more provocatively sexually than any time in the history of America. The way young girls dress today, you know that better than I do. Everybody knows that. They're the most provocative dress. They're being encouraged to dress like that. At the same time, the feminist movement was saying to men, if you dare look at that, and they want you to, and this writer is saying that now she wants the male gaze, but if she actually got the male gaze, then right. That person he would be canceled. Like
it's
Me
okay
Too.
For the woman to want it, but it's not okay for the men to do it.
Yes, and that's what destroyed Me Too, and that's what's destroying all these internal contradictions, because they're all contrary to human nature. We have rules and laws against people walking around naked for a very good reason, because we don't want people to provoke people sexually, and we don't want to see people's private parts in public. No one wants to see that, and that's why for centuries there's been laws against nudity. And as revolutionaries, they think they can break these ancient customs and traditions that were never based, they think, on anything other than oppression, when they were all based on human nature. And we inherited all of this tradition, and it's served us very well. And the final thing I say about when getting back to Elon Musk, I have never thought. I was thinking that when we were talking about the hatred of Elon Musk, we have never seen anybody, whether you like him or not, we have never seen anybody like him in our lifetime that broke into the big three auto industry. No one is there. They've tried to do that. Studebaker, American Motor, nobody could do it. He did it. Nobody has supplanted NASA like he did. He's a one-man NASA. He saved NASA. He's probably going to save these poor astronauts that were abandoned by the Biden space program. And then he just revolutionized social media. Had he not bought X, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, all those tech giants would have defected to Trump. They would have censored the news. They would have had the FBI. He is a Michelangelo. He's really a Renaissance person. And for them to, I say that because AOC said, I think yesterday, that of all the billionaires she met, he was the dumbest, or he was very unintelligent.
Yes, she did.
And I think of all the dumb things she said. Yeah, absolutely. So
yeah, no, it's shocking. I mean, her cluelessness, and I mean the emptiness of her insults. Okay, while we're on the subject of salaciousness, I am happy to tell you it's back in Super Bowl ads, and I think America is just fine with that. Now, I do think it's interesting. You get a preview. The big game is this Sunday. It's going to be Chiefs versus Eagles, and these things can be a bit of a cultural touchstone, right? Like, just where are we as a nation? They are removing from the end zone the end racism signs. That's big, right? Because we've been subjected to those lectures from the NFL for 4 going on 5 years now. They are not eliminating the so-called Black National Anthem. We're going to have that thing, which is divisive in this context. Yes, it is, but they're doing it. We are going to get a halftime interview of President Trump, unlike Joe Biden, who wouldn't sit for one because he couldn't. Trump has weighed in on the Super Bowl, where he will be attending, and let me see if I can find what he said. He posted 2 great quarterbacks in this game, also an unbelievable running back, and the absolute best tight end in football. Now, we think that's a reference to Saquon Barkley on the Eagles and Travis Kelce on the Chiefs. Incredible coaching. If they would only get rid of that really weird-looking new kickoff deal, which actually makes football more dangerous, there's some new kickoff at the NFL, they would be doing everybody, especially the fans, a big favor. Anyway, it will be a great game. I'll be doing the interview before the game at 3 p.m. There hasn't been one in 4 years. Gee, I wonder why. Okay, so that's Trump. And then you tell me, like all over Twitter the past 2 weeks, anything that happens, you see like a Trump thing or Trump dance or, girls celebrating Trump, and you see the line, "We are so back. We are so back." That's kind of how I feel looking at this Carl's Jr. ad. We are so back. It's featuring an influencer by the name of Alex Earl. Watch.
Let's be real. Everyone's going to be a hot mess after the big game. Been there. Done that. And I've got just what you need to cure that post-party bug. The Carl's Jr. Hangover Burger. Egg, double bacon, yeah, you need that double bacon. Charbroiled beef, hash browns, cheese, and sauce. Just the way I like it. And guess what? It's free the day after the big game. You just have to download the Carl's Jr. app and sign up for my rewards. So get your free hangover burger on Monday, February 10th. He'll definitely need one.
Okay, now Victor, Alex is a very attractive woman in a bikini with an enormous burger, and there are guys drooling over her. It's been 8 years since Carl's Jr.
No,
did this.
she had a gas-guzzling sports car, not an EV.
Yeah.
So, and it kind of reminds me of during the Reagan years. You remember the 1984, you're too young maybe, but They had that great scene where the woman runs in with the ball and she throws it into the screen. It's Orwell's screen, and that's supposed to be a competition for Apple. Apple was coming in. Everybody said IBM or Microsoft would crush Apple. And this woman runs into this Orwellian crowd that's mesmerized by these dictators, and she just throws a ball into the screen and it shatters. It was very famous, and it was kind of an epitome of the age that Reagan was kind of, that whole period of 84 to 85, 86, it was like, we don't have to do any of that stuff anymore. And that was a very liberating period when he came in. He hasn't done, with all due respect to his memory and legacy, which was wonderful, he hasn't done, I don't think he did as much in 8 years as Donald Trump has done in 4 years and 1 month. I really don't.
Right, especially the last 1 month.
The last, it's not even, I don't know, it's just
It's 2
not
weeks.
even a month yet. Seems like a year. And he's not done yet. He's indestructible, and everybody.
Don't you think there's
it's
something
like,
to it? Like, I feel like there is something significant to the fact that the obvious nature of men and women is back on screen and being celebrated. That women love to be sexy, where appropriate, and in a Carl's Jr. ad, it's totally appropriate. And men love to fawn over them, and that's a dynamic that actually leads to the continuation of humankind. And it's fine, but we went through this crazy period. It's no accident that it's been 8 years, right? 8 years ago, we were at the height of the Me Too era. Now it's like, you know what? It's fine to show off the female form and have guys drooling over her instead of the stupid Gillette ad, which was like some self-flagellating guy trying to show us what a feminist he was, right? Like, something's changing. We are so back, baby.
And you can see it with comedians now. Comedians are dropping all of the self-censorship. They're talking about everything. Chris, it's back to where it was. It's almost there. And I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be one of the most wonderful things for so-called minorities. Where I work, I think maybe the 4 most accomplished people where I work were Shelby Steele, Tom Sowell, Condoleezza Rice, and Kyron Skinner, and they were all African American, but race was always incidental. It was never essential to them, and they competed, and they all grew up in a period of not Kyron, but the other 3 grew up in a period of Jim Crow, and yet they were spectacular scholars, and they never. And I think now that's the model, and I think if African American people they'll realize that this DEI was a hindrance because it unduly stigmatized everybody. In many cases, unfairly, because, as I said, I went to lunch twice a month for 15 years with Tom Sowell, the 2 of us.
Oh, you're so lucky.
It was like Tom was like a genius, and Shelby was the same way. And I talked
Carol
once in a
Swain
while
too.
with
She's actually coming on next week.
Condoleezza Rice. Yeah, I mean, they're all. I mean, African American people have excelled in so many fields, and they don't need DEI. And the people who are the mediocrities of all races, I think, and a lot of the DEI is promulgated by white virtue signaling, performance art, guilty whites that feel that that's going to make them somehow feel good about themselves in lieu of actual accomplishment.
It's ridiculous.
When I'm in academia, and unfortunately I'm still in it, most of the people who are DEI who are white are mediocre, and they just want to hammer that. Look at me, and you want to say, well, what are you publishing? What are you writing? What are you teaching? And they're all not preeminent. And so we've got to get rid of this commissar system, because if we don't, and I think we've almost got rid of it, what we see in the FAA or the Los Angeles Fire Department, it's going to be endemic, and all of our institutions are not going to work anymore. And we're going to be like the former Soviet Union or a third world country. But I think we've been saved in the nick of time. If Trump had not been elected, I just shudder to see what would have happened the next 4 years.
Mm-hmm. No, totally. The back and forth between Hillary Clinton and Sean Duffy, I don't know if you saw it. It's the greatest thing.
I did.
I'm going off of the Super Bowl for 1 second because this is just too good. Okay, where is that post? I've got to find the Hillary Clinton, the original packet. Hold on. Yeah, it's the Solana pack. Okay, sorry. That's Mikey's coming up next. All right, so here is the Hillary. She tried to troll Sean Duffy the transportation secretary. And Duffy tweeted out the following on X. Big news, talk to the Doge team. They are going to plug in to help upgrade our aviation system. Hillary Clinton decides to weigh in. They have no relevant experience. Most of them aren't old enough to rent a car. And you're going to let them mess with airline safety that's already deteriorated on your watch? Duffy. Madam Secretary, with all due respect, experienced Washington bureaucrats are the reason our nation's infrastructure is crumbling. You need to sit this one out. Hillary. U.S. airlines had gone 16 years without fatal crashes. Then MAGA fired the FAA chief, gutted the Aviation Security Advisory Committee, and threatened air traffic controllers with layoffs. Now there have been 2 fatal crashes. Hope your unvetted 22-year-olds fix things fast. I thought he was just going to walk away because she was being so obstinate. No, he didn't. He came back at her. Duffy. I know you're lashing out because Doge is uncovering your family's obscene grifting via USAID, but I won't let you lie and distort facts. The FAA administrator announced he resigned over a month before Trump took office, and the air traffic controllers were always exempt from Trump's civil service buyouts. The previous administration shamelessly used U.S. Department of Transportation as a slush fund for the Green New scam, throwing away money and resources on wasteful environmental and social justice projects rather than updating our nation's antiquated air traffic control systems and other critical infrastructure. I'm returning this department to its mission of safety by using innovative technology in transportation and infrastructure. Your team had its chance and failed. We're moving on without you because the American people want us to make America's transportation system great again. And yes, we're bringing the 22-year-olds with us. Oh, shots fired.
She's never recovered from the 2016 defeat. She really hasn't. She's been crushed. She used to be kind of a normal person, and she had some respect, bipartisan, but after 2016, she joined the resistance, and she's just a crushed person. And she's very lucky, you know, Megan. If you look back, she's a very lucky person because she destroyed classified documents that were under federal subpoena and 30,000 emails in total, and then destroyed the devices under which they were written. And if Donald Trump had done that, he wouldn't have been given. And they let her off. She's been given a pass her whole life. And I don't know what the degree. I don't think Chelsea Clinton got any money, but I don't know why you'd give any money to a Clinton initiative, given the record of that. Anything with a Clinton name on it, going back to Clinton speaking, you know, in mayor of Moscow, giving him $500,000, and suddenly Hillary sees to release North American uranium to a Russian company, and the foundation got, you know, money from Russian oligarchs. So that whole Clinton enterprise is corrupt, and it has been for years, and she knows it.
It stinks.
I think
all right, wait, I gotta do one more. I gotta do one more
out.
Super Bowl ad with you. One more.
Yeah.
My cultural commentator here at BDH. This one, you mentioned comedy and how it's coming back. Well, Shane Gillis was a comedian who got canceled during the height of the wokeness because he got hired by SNL, and then it emerged that in one of his comedy routines, he did an Asian accent. So they canceled him on SNL for doing an Asian. It was just absolutely absurd. He's back too. He is starring in the latest, this is no accident, Bud Light ad, which is all testosterone. Here.
You wanna go fishing tomorrow? I got a colonoscopy tomorrow.
Fellas, I accidentally threw a lane party.
Okay, Ted.
They're on their way.
Big men on the cul-de-sac.
You call this a party?
Cul-de-sac party.
Launch. Here's our metaphor for an invitation.
Is that our leaf blower?
Party at the sack.
You are cordially invited to the end of the cul-de-sac.
This is incredible.
Your mower smokes meat?
Our smoker cuts grass.
Hell yeah.
I spend most of my money on this.
Your rig? Fully custom.
How many Bud Lights can you fit in that puppy? As many Bud Lights as it takes.
A lot of Bud Lights.
Cul-de-sac pop. Phil, get off the boat. The HOA's already breathing down my neck.
It's bearded men, guys with baseball caps, party at the sack. smoking meat with the women, and I didn't see any fake women by the name of Dylan Mulvaney. This company has heard us. It's obvious.
Yeah, I think they don't hire any more Harvard graduates to be their ad czars, and they decided that the 0.01% of the population is not as profitable as white male working class, I guess, or any
their base, their bread and butter,
Hispanic. Yeah, that's their base, and so I guess they figure they're not going to commit suicide anymore. And I don't know. It's all the thematic. It's all thematic that we're waking. As we said before, it's just incredible that one guy with executive orders and fearlessness like Trump. You know, I was thinking just very quickly, if we had any other Romney-esque type or McCain or Paul Ryan president right now and he was elected, he would get a committee to examine DEI, or he would say on the one hand, on the other hand, I don't know what to do about cutting AID, USAID. It wouldn't be like this. It really wouldn't. Trump is sui generis. Without him, we wouldn't be doing any of this. A typical Republican Orthodox approach to this would be to get a committee and then maybe compromise the force of it away with the Democrats, just like we saw. But this is different. This is a really true counter-revolution.
It's the whole theme of our discussion is sort of what's happening to the country versus where the Democrats are. And I'll end with this. Fetterman said the following to Puck News. He was commenting on that new DNC leadership, where they were so worried about they don't have enough non-binaries. And everybody agreed Kamala lost because of racism and sexism. And then they had the nerve to elect a white male as head of the DNC. And as the vice chair, they elected another white male, David Hogg, one of the people who is a student at that school in Parkland, Florida, where there was a mass shooting. And he's been just truly one of the most vicious leftists ever since. So Fetterman says the following. The new leadership of the DNC, the vice chair, David Hogg, called for abolishing ICE and defunding the police. I'm concerned we haven't paid attention to what happened. And boy, does that ever sum it up. VDH, I got to run. Thank you for spending your Friday with us. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Megan.
All right, up next, Mike Solana is here. Don't miss that. We continue to face uncertainty when it comes to the economy, with a perfect storm brewing as Social Security and Medicare hit a breaking point, as the largest generation is hitting retirement. A smaller workforce means a smaller tax base. You pair that with our growing national debt and our rising cost of living, and we could have a very big problem on our hands. So what are you doing now to protect your family for the future? Are you diversifying? Gold can be very useful to you in this. It can be a safe haven in hard economic times. And Birch Gold has a super great reputation